Welcome, my bountiful friends. It's time to pick up your rifle, grab your dynamite, and fight fascism. Because today, we're going to be delving deep into what it means to fight in someone else's war in Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls. This story centres on an American university lecturer who can't stand idly by as the forces of fascism march across Europe. Bringing his knowledge of Spanish and demolition to newfound comrades in a strange land, he seeks to achieve his objective while overcoming adversity and a hostile idiot. As usual, I'll be diving deep into the psychological shadows, and as always there will be as many spoilers as there are dead combatants. And there will be plenty of opinions too, so you have been warned. And before we begin in earnest, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. Hemingway began writing For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1939, drawing directly from his experiences as a war correspondent during the Spanish Civil War, as well as his own experiences of warfare during World War I. Between the years of 1937 and 1938, he had travelled extensively through Spain whilst reporting for the North American Newspaper Alliance, and he witnessed firsthand the ideological clashes, guerrilla warfare, and human suffering that would later provide the novel's emotional and political heft. He worked on the manuscript in a number of different locations, from the Hotel Ambos Mundos in Havana, Cuba, to his home in Key West, Florida, and finally in Sun Valley, Idaho. These varied settings offered him both solitude and inspiration, allowing him to evoke stunning scenery as well as psychological intensity into a strongly crafted narrative. He finally completed the manuscript in July 1940 at the Intercontinental New York Barclay Hotel. The novel's protagonist, Robert Jordan, was loosely modelled on real-life American volunteers in the International Brigades, and the story's setting in the Sierra de Guadarrama mountains between Madrid and Segovia were based on actual terrain he had traversed. The bridge demolition mission at the heart of the plot was inspired by real sabotage operations carried out by Republican forces. The immersion in the conflict gave the novel its granular authenticity, though he fictionalised many characters and events to serve the emotional arc of the story. The title For Whom the Bell Tolls was taken from John Donne's 1624 metaphysical prose Devotions upon Emergent Occasions, and specifically Meditation 17. Hemingway quoted Donne's famous lines in the epigraph, emphasising the theme of interconnected human fate. Never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. This philosophical underpinning shaped the novel's moral tone and its exploration of sacrifice, solidarity, and mortality. The book was published by Charles Scribner's Sons on October 21st, 1940, with an initial print run of 75,000 copies. It was selected as a Book of the Month Club choice, which significantly boosted its visibility and sales. Within months, it had sold over 500,000 copies, making it one of Hemingway's most commercially successful works at that time. The cast of characters for Whom the Bell Tolls is centred on a small band of Republican Spanish guerrillas and an outsider. The guerrilla band as a whole mirrors the fragmentation and moral ambiguity of war. Many form a contrast between valour and cowardice, and their divergent responses to prolonged violence. Robert Jordan is the protagonist. He's an American volunteer fighting with the Republican side. He's idealistic, intelligent, courageous, introspective, and initially emotionally restrained. He's a symbol of foreign involvement in an ideological war. His arc traces the tension between political conviction and personal emotion, especially as he falls in love and confronts mortality. Maria is a young Spanish woman and almost immediately becomes Jordan's lover. She is gentle, traumatized, sincere and devoted. She embodies both the personal cost of war and the fragile beauty worth preserving. Her relationship with Jordan brings emotional human stakes to the otherwise militaristic mission. Pilar is Pablo's partner and the de facto leader of the group. She's incredibly strong, earthy, maternal, superstitious and blunt. She's the moral backbone and spiritual guide of the guerrilla band, and she often channels deeper folk wisdom and courage than the men. She's a former flamenco performer. She recalls past brutality with vivid emotion. Pablo is the troubled leader of the guerrilla band, and he's somewhat of a shocker. He's cynical, alcoholic, unpredictable, was once brave but is now fearful, having seen the consequences and brutality of the war. He represents disillusionment and the degeneration of the revolutionary spirit. His wavering loyalty creates tension and continuously threatens the mission. Anselmo is an elderly guerrilla and is loyal to Jordan. He's kind, principled, devout, and hates killing. He's the moral conscience of the novel, and his internal struggle with taking life humanizes the cost of war. He dies at the end during the epic bridge attack and symbolizes the loss of innocence. Augustin is a fierce guerrilla fighter. He is loyal, foul-mouthed, hot-tempered, and fiercely anti-fascist. He embodies the emotional fury and raw edge of the Republican fighters. He often speaks for the unfiltered rage of the working class and is deeply shaken by the losses, but remains committed. Raphael is a drunken comic relief guerrilla. He is jolly, foolish, and utterly unreliable. He adds much needed levity to the proceedings, and he also highlights the dysfunction of the irregular guerrilla groups who are going up against the trained soldiers of Franco's fascist forces. El Sordo is the leader of another guerrilla band allied with Pablo's. He's brave, stoic, and pragmatic. He shows the isolation and bravery of fighters in the mountains, and his death and the annihilation of his band marks the futility of the cause. He's killed in a fascist ambush after a noble last stand. Fernando is a quiet and religious guerrilla. He's conservative, gentle, and observant. He serves as a minor contrast to the more revolutionary characters. He's symbolic of the diversity within the Republican ranks. Robert Jordan, an American professor of Spanish who has been trained as a dynamiter, volunteers to work with the Republican guerrilla forces in their fight against General Franco's fascist forces. His mission, which is given to him by a Russian Soviet general, is to blow up a strategically important bridge behind enemy lines to support a coming Republican offensive. Guided by an elderly guerrilla, Jordan arrives at a mountain cave hideout where a band of fighters are led by the unpredictable Pablo. Pablo is wary of the mission, fearing reprisals, and refuses to partake, but his strong-willed partner, Pilar, quickly asserts leadership and pledges the group's support. Among the guerrillas is Maria, who is a young woman who has been traumatized by fascist violence. Jordan and Maria fall in love almost immediately, their relationship unfolding rapidly amid the tension of war. Pilar encourages their bond, seeing it as a rare light in the darkness. Jordan also meets the other fighters of the band. Each comes with distinct personality and varying levels of commitment to the cause. Jordan scouts the bridge and consults with El Sordo, leader of a nearby guerrilla band, who agrees to help despite the obvious risks. However, the operation must occur in daylight, which further increases the danger. As the group prepares, Pablo grows increasingly erratic, eventually stealing and discarding the detonators in a moment of cowardice. He later returns, remorseful, bringing reinforcements to aid the mission. Meanwhile, Jordan sends Andre to deliver a dispatch to General Goltz, warning that the fascists have discovered the offensive and urging its cancellation. Andre faces bureaucratic delays and the message arrives too late, and the attack is to proceed as planned. On the day of the mission, the guerrillas assault the bridge. Pilar and Pablo lead the attack on the sentries, while Jordan and Anselmo plant the explosives. The bridge is destroyed, but Anselmo is killed by shrapnel. During the retreat, Jordan's horse is shot out from under him, and he suffers a broken leg in the fall. Realizing that he cannot escape, he urges Maria to flee with the others. Alone and wounded, Jordan prepares to ambush and delay the approaching fascist forces, which will undoubtedly result in his own death. In his final moments, he reflects on love, duty, and the fleeting nature of life. His thoughts crystallize into a sense of unity with the world. He feels integrated, having lived a full life in just a few days. Jordan's journey is not just physical, but existential, culminating in a quiet act of defiance that echoes the novel's epigraph. Never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Hemingway's style was, like the man himself, something of an iconic cliché. It was famous, or perhaps infamous, for being incredibly minimalist. It was stripped back, devoid of any unnecessary dressings and scene settings, and any poetic license. It was often said that he tried to convey the action and idea in as few words as possible. What remained was often taut, declarative, and emotionally compressed, and it became the gold standard for all masculine prose. For Whom the Bell Tolls in particular offers a model of the stoic, morally burdened male protagonist that influenced the likes of Norman Mailer in the 1950s and Cormac McCarthy all the way into the 80s and beyond. Writers didn't just mimic his style, they absorbed his ethos. The idea that masculinity meant grace under pressure, emotional restraint, and moral clarity in chaos. This particular novel is often cited as something of a departure from his signature minimalist style, while still retaining many of its core principles. Known for his iceberg theory, a technique where the deeper meaning is submerged beneath sparse surface detail, Hemingway typically favoured short, declarative sentences, stripped down vocabulary, and journalistic clarity that left emotional interpretation to the reader. This style is evident in works like The Old Man and the Sea and A Farewell to Arms, where understatement and omission are central to the narrative power. The prose for Whom the Bell Tolls is more expansive, often employing stream of consciousness passages that delve into Jordan's internal reflections. These segments feature run-on sentences, repetition, and a looser syntax that mirrors the chaotic flow of thought and emotion. This marks a shift from Hemingway's earlier reliance on terse, clipped phrasing. The atmosphere of the novel is one of grim fatalism, underscored by the constant presence of death, sacrifice, and moral ambiguity. Hemingway's descriptions of the Spanish countryside are vivid yet restrained, often juxtaposing natural beauty with the brutality of war. The cave where the guerrillas hide, the pine needle floor, and the bridge Jordan must destroy all serve as symbolic spaces, representing shelter, transience, and the fragile connections between people. Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls explores several interwoven themes that reflect the psychological, moral, and existential tensions of war. These themes are not represented as abstract ideas, but are instead embodied in the characters' choices, their relationships, and their internal conflicts. War and moral ambiguity is the core theme, and at its core the novel interrogates the ethics of violence. Jordan is tasked with blowing up a bridge, an inanimate object. However, it will almost certainly result in someone's death too. And Selma struggles with the morality of killing, while Pablo embraces it with a pragmatic detachment. Hemingway refuses to offer easy answers. Instead, he presents war as a crucible where ideals are tested and often ultimately compromised. The Spanish Civil War is not romanticized. It's depicted as a brutal, chaotic conflict that erodes certainty and exposes the fragility of human conviction. Love as redemption is another theme. The relationship between Jordan and Maria offers a counterpoint to the violence. Their love, though sudden and intense, becomes a sanctuary, a space where he rediscovers meaning and emotional depth. Hemingway uses their bond to explore how intimacy can restore a sense of humanity in the midst of evil and destruction. Love is not escapism here, it's a form of resistance, a way to affirm life, even as death looms. Idealism versus disillusionment. Jordan begins the novel as an idealist committed to the Republican cause, but as he witnesses betrayal, cowardice, and the complexities of factional politics, his faith begins to erode. The novel charts his evolution from ideological certainty to existential clarity. He doesn't abandon his mission, but he no longer sees it through the lens of political purity. This tension between belief and reality is mirrored in other characters, especially Pilar, who blends mystical intuition with hard-earned wisdom. Death and the unity of humanity. The title and epigraph of the book underscores the theme of interconnectedness. The saying, "No man is an island," becomes a moral anchor for the novel. Jordan's final act, staying behind to delay the fascists, is not just tactical, it's sacrificial. His death is framed as part of a larger human tapestry, suggesting that individual loss reverberates through the collective. Hemingway uses this theme to elevate the narrative beyond politics, positioning it as a meditation on shared fate and existential dignity. Time and the eternal present. The novel unfolds over just a few days, yet it feels expansive. Time is compressed to heighten the emotional intensity, as characters often reflect on the past or imagine futures that may never come. Jordan's final thoughts, his sense of integration with the world, suggest a transcendence of linear time. The present moment becomes eternal, charged with meaning and memory. Together, all these themes form a layered exploration of what it means to live, love, and die with purpose. Hemingway doesn't offer resolution, he offers resonance. The bell tolls not just for Jordan, but for all of us. The novel received widespread acclaim upon its publication and has since become an enduring work of 20th century American literature. Its critical reception and legacy are shaped by its thematic depth, stylistic innovation, and historical resonance, as well as its author's legend, which arguably stands taller than all of his writings put together. When the novel was released, Hemingway was already a literary heavyweight. but For Whom the Bell Tolls was hailed as a return to form and a major artistic achievement. War and crisis was already very much in the air, and American critics praised its emotional intensity, moral complexity, and vivid portrayal of the Spanish Civil War. Time magazine called it Hemingway's great novel, emphasizing its exploration of death, love, and political struggle. And Carlos Baker, Hemingway's biographer, noted that the book marked a shift in Hemingway's worldview, from detached observation to engaged moral inquiry. Over the following decades, it maintained its stature as a literary classic by being frequently studied in classrooms and cited in discussions of war literature, existentialism, and political ethics. It's often grouped with Hemingway's other masterpieces as part of his core canon, and while everyone may not get around to reading it, nearly everyone has at least heard of it, and most know of its subject matter. The novel became a rite of passage for male writers trying to define their own voice against Hemingway's shadow. Some emulated him, others rebelled, but few ignored him. The quiet reverberations in prose style, character archetypes, and moral tone are where the real legacy lives. Whilst researching this novel's cultural impact and legacy, the main paltry online offering in multiple sources is precisely one single film adaptation that was made only a few years after the book was published, and one rather good Metallica song from the 1980s. But this belies its true cultural impact. I suspect that the internet chickened out from talking about this, as we unfortunately live in an age where everyone is seemingly invited to take a polarised stance on absolutely everything and lose their mind as soon as a thought crime is committed. Hemingway was, and arguably still is in some quarters, a cultural giant. He was, until he decided to end it all prematurely by his own hand, a living and breathing icon of masculinity in its own right. He was seen as the 20th century's poster man of a man's man in the world of masculine literature when that was still a thing. A rugged man writing rugged books for other rugged men. On one side stood a mountain of ubiquitous chick lit concerning family trauma and bad childhoods, and on the other stood Hemingway's ghost, kitted out in full hunting regalia, sipping rum from a tumbler and smoking a Cuban cigar whilst banging out tales on his trusty manual typewriter. Tales of daring do and solitary heroes triumphing over adversity, even at the cost of their own lives. Now, I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying this is what Hemingway and his writing was all about. And this is the identity that is his truest legacy, and the novel's legacy as well. And it comes attached to all his works, especially for Whom the Bells Toll. With that said, let's take a closer look at the novel itself. There are some real surprises here. The biggest surprise is arguably the fact that the protagonist is fighting for the Republicans, who were aligned and directly supported by the Soviet Union and its forces. This was at a time when the US establishment was already decidedly anti-communist, having seen what transpired during the Russian Revolution. And some sections of well-to-do American society, a not so small minority, were actually pro-fascist, wanting something similar installed in the US via something like the Bund movement. Many other white Anglo-American writers fell for the spell during this time, so Hemingway's choice is a real surprise, and it must have created considerable tension in his traditional readership. There's evidence suggesting that right-leaning readers admired Jordan's courage but were naturally uneasy about his affiliations. Some critics tried to downplay the communist connection by emphasizing Jordan's personal morality over party loyalty. Leftist intellectuals like Alva Bessie criticized Hemingway for not being radical enough, arguing that he didn't fully grasp the plight of the common man, while Hemingway himself insisted he had no party but a deep interest in love for the Republic, thereby positioning the novel as profoundly humanist, not propagandist. This ideological ambiguity made the book something of a litmus test, with many readers projecting their own politics onto it, which only deepened its cultural penetration. The novel's legacy isn't just about rugged heroism, it's also about its unravelling. The story is something of a pivot point in Hemingway's career. It reveals a more emotionally vulnerable male. Jordan falls in love, questions his mission, and faces death with introspection. The nature of the female characters in the novel suggests he was reassessing the stereotypical view of patriarchal masculinity and moving towards a more complex view of gender and identity. His portrayal of women in the book is far more layered than his reputation might suggest. Let's start with Maria. She's often dismissed by critics as a passive figure or a romantic ideal, but that overlooks her symbolic weight. She's imbued with trauma, but also with resilience. She's not just a love interest, she's a living metaphor for Spain itself. Violated, fragmented, yet still capable of beauty and tenderness. Her relationship with Jordan isn't just emotional, it's political, existential, and restorative. Some critics have challenged the unrealistic speed of the emotional recovery and romance, but others argue that Hemingway was attempting to show how intimacy can be a form of healing, however imperfectly rendered. Then there's Pilar, who absolutely breaks the gender stereotype. She's not just strong, she's strategic, commanding, and emotionally complex. Parallels have been directly drawn between Pilar and Dolores Ibárruri, whose nom de guerre was La Pasionaria, and she was the real-life revolutionary icon of the Spanish Civil War. Hemingway even referenced the La Pasionaria in his documentary The Spanish Earth, describing her as the voice of the new Spanish woman. Pilar channels that archetype. She's not conventionally beautiful, but she's magnetic, feared, and deeply respected. She commands the guerrilla band, makes tactical decisions, and even contemplates killing Pablo if he jeopardizes the mission. That's not just a nod to feminism, it's revolutionary womanhood. What's fascinating is that Hemingway, often caricatured as the high priest of masculine stoicism, seems to be testing the boundaries of his own archetype. Pilar is arguably the female mirror of Robert Jordan. Both are burdened by leadership, haunted by death, and driven by a moral code that transcends ideology. Pilar is not a sidekick, she's a co-architect of the narrative emotional and strategic core. So Hemingway may have been trying to craft a female equivalent to his man's man, but he didn't just replicate the mould, he distorted it, infused it with mysticism, maternal wisdom, and revolutionary fire. So what are your thoughts on this tale of action and daring do? Which character did you like the most, and which scene did you find the most profound? Once more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more deep dives into the world of literature. Until next time, keep reading, and remember, if you find yourself at a loose end and at a loss at what to do, then maybe you can join an international brigade and fight fascism, and meet new and interesting people, and get a new boyfriend, girlfriend to boot. So, it's time to make tracks and blow up that bridge. So long, and adios.